The period between 1890 and 1895 marks an important chapter in the firearms history of the United States. This is the time when the first US military and civilian rifles entered service firing smokeless powder charge cartridges. One key player of these times was the ingenious designer John Moses Browning. His goal with the model 1894 rifle was to create a lightweight, small-frame rifle that was strong enough to fire the full-power cartridges charged with the new, way more powerful propellant. He was the father of the rifle, but also one of the fathers of his well-known cartridge, the 30 Winchester centerfire.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Capandball, your favorite gun channel in beautiful bright Hungarish language, and what I have in my hands is the 30-30 caliber version of the new Uberti 1894 lever action rifle. There's a copy of the original pre-64 1964 Winchester models, which is quite good because you don't have all the modern stuff in it, so there are no coil springs, there are no small parts in it. This is exactly how John Moses Browning designed that rifle, and it is a very faithful reproduction, by the way. It is made in 38-55 and also 30-30 caliber. So this chapter is especially about the history of the 30-30. But it's a good question, why would you buy such an antique rifle today, or let's say an obsolete rifle? Well, the reason is simple, because they are good rifles. So you get a very accurate barrel, you have a very smooth action, so it is very good for hunting and very good for target shooting. Okay, for hunting, you can ask me, but where do I mount the thermal scope? Or where do I put the night vision? And the answer is simple, nowhere. Because you can save that money if you hunt with open sights, or like this little aperture sight that I have on my rifle. And you save that money and you can buy another historical vintage firearm that you can use for hunting with your open sights, which offers much more excitement, much more challenge, and of course, much stronger memories. So that's a win-win situation. Okay, anyway, we have a dovetail here. Here used to be a buckhorn sight that I removed because I'm using now the rifle with the aperture sight. But at the place of the buckhorn sight, at this dovetail, you can put, let's say, Picatinny or Weaver rail, where you can mount red dots, or you can put a long eye relief scope, or you can put a side-mounted scope on it, but open sight is just good for me. Although the rifle is a repro, it still has some vintage parts on it. That's actually an original 19th century Lyman tank sight, which was a very, very good invention. So it is out of question that these aperture sights are more accurate than any kind of iron sight. Now, Mr. Lyman, William Lyman, when he invented this system in the 1870s, he was searching for something that is just as accurate as the vernier sights and still has the low light capabilities as well.
William Lyman started to make tank sights for friends in the second half of the 1870s and patented his first design, the Lyman No. 1 sight, in 1879. There seemed to be a strong market for these little gadgets that not only increased the sharp depth of view for the shooter, making both the front sight and the target sharp, but also allowed enough light to enter the reticle of the eye for hunting purposes.
And there's a point in using this sight because you have large aperture here. You can see that there is no large disc in front of your eyes, which means that you have a lot of light entering your aiming eye, which means that it will perform well in low light conditions. And still, it acts as a ghost ring. So this is the same. Actually, he was the one who invented the ghost ring system, which means that you see a very little faint and very thin circle just in front of your eye, and your brain can exactly center the front sight into the middle, because that's what your brain does.
50 meters.
I already developed the load to closely replicate the original muzzle velocity of the rifle and the cartridge, so this is not the first 50-meter trial. But let's see now how it groups with 3 shots at 50 meters. The aiming point is 1 inch below the black aiming mark.
Let's check it.
And if you had any doubts about the Lyman peep sight, how it works with the post front sight, well, here is your answer. 2 in the same hole and 1 very close, all within the group of the inner 10 ring. Just excellent.
Probably you have already seen my video about the history of the 1894 Winchester rifles. If you check that video, by the way, the link is in the description of this video, you could see that I was shooting the 38-55 caliber. Now, when this rifle was designed by John Moses Browning, so what's the benefit here? It is a very strong action, but it's a small action, so much smaller than the 1886 systems. Now, when he designed this rifle, the original 2 calibers it was launched was the 38-55, which means a 38 caliber bullet and 55 grains of a black powder charge, and the 32-40, which is a 32 caliber bullet and a 40 grain black powder charge.
Only after a year, in 1895, came the 2 modern cartridges, the 30-30, or as it was called, the 30 Winchester smokeless, and the 25-35, both charged with smokeless powder.
So by that time, Europe was ahead of the US because in Europe, for example, in France, in 1886, a new rifle entered service, which was the Label rifle, that fired an 8mm round with a full metal jacket bullet, that's a lightweight bullet, with a good ballistic form, propelled with a smokeless charge. And it was a repeating rifle, of course. So the US was working on the smokeless cartridge concept, selecting the 30 caliber, by the way, in the early 90s only.
At the beginning of the decade of 1890, the US Army was eagerly searching for a new repeating rifle that could match the excellent capabilities of the new European small-caliber smokeless charged military rifles. The Board of Ordnance tested 53 types that year. The winner of the show was the Krag Jorgensen rifle in 1893, firing a new smokeless military cartridge charged with a 220-grain round-nose metal-patched lead core bullet and 40 grains of Belgian veteran powder. But the first ever Winchester rifle to fire a smokeless cartridge was in fact not the model 1894 lever-action rifle, but the model 1883 Winchester Hotchkiss bolt-action rifle that was chambered for the 30 US or 30-40 Krag cartridge. But this was not selected by the board. The 3040 was actually inspired by a European cartridge. It was a close copy of the British 303 cartridge that delivered a decent muzzle velocity of 2066 feet per sec. Although the Winchester designed 30-30 cartridge was charged with 10 grains less smokeless powder compared to the 30 US cartridge, its performance was very close to the 30-40, so it immediately became a hit.
And this is still in production today, and if we go back to 1895 and we calculate against 2025, then we finally realize that this cartridge is actually 130 years old, ladies and gentlemen, and it's still here, and it still shoots game, and we still use it for target shooting. Hooray! Happy birthday, 3030, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's see now how the rifle does at 100 meters with the cartridge reloaded close to the original specifications. The point of aim is again an inch below the black aiming mark. And again, a very satisfying group, just a little more than 1 minute of angle. Very nice for open sights, I believe.
The Winchester company started working on the smokeless cartridge in 1891, And they chose the cartridge case of the 3850 Ballard cartridge. Now, that was on the market since 1870, middle of the 1870s, and it was quite easy to modify the new cartridge case from the old one because it was necked down to 30 caliber, and then you arrived to the case of the 3030. Now, when this cartridge was launched, originally it was called the 30 caliber Winchester smokeless. But just a year later, or a few months later, the competitors also realized that this will be a very good platform for their rifles as well. Marlin first launched their rifle in 1895 for this cartridge, but they did not want to call it a Winchester cartridge because they did want to promote the Winchester company written on the rifles or on their cartridge boxes. So when Union Metallic Cartridge started to produce cartridges for Marlin as well, they started to call it 3030 with a 30 caliber bullet and 30 grains of powder, but it was technically the same cartridge. So we can also find the Winchester 30 caliber Winchester centerfire, the 3030 or 30 Winchester smokeless as 30 caliber Marlin or 3030S or 3030 Marlin. These are all the same cartridges. Even if you're European, then you can call it 762 by 51 R, and that is also the 3030. So there are many names, but one single 3030. Now the performance of this cartridge was excellent. The 30 grains of DuPont powder propelled the 30 caliber 160 grain bullet with an extreme muzzle velocity of 1970 feet per second. And that's a lot. That's much better than any of the black powder cartridges, and much flatter trajectory, by the way. The Winchester company kept the original name, like 30 Winchester centerfire, marked on their rifle and on their boxes up until 1946, when they finally changed to 3030 as well, accepting that this is everybody's cartridge now. But we still remember this cartridge as the 30 Winchester centerfire, and this is what I love on the Uberti rifle, that this is the caliber marking on the barrel as well. So this is also quite traditional in case of this rifle.
Hand reloading cartridges was born on the same day the first metallic cartridges were made. Recycling the most valuable part of the cartridge, the brass, was obvious, and it is even today. To allow the customer to reload their cartridges, Winchester patented a new handy reloading kit that was small enough to fit in the standard hunting equipment. This new set of tools was designed by the excellent gunsmith William Mason, well known for his inventions at the dawn of modern breech-loading firearms. He had a wide experience as he worked for Colt, Remington, and Winchester as well during his career. The patent was granted to Mason on February 13, 1894. The tool could unprime, resize, reprime the cases, and seat the new bullet after recharging the case. It is a good question why the new design was necessary while Winchester already had excellent tools for straight-walled black powder cartridges. And the answer is simple. To resize the case fired with smokeless charges needed more force, and this force was provided by the new ingenious device.
So ladies and gentlemen, now I'm going to reload the 3030 cartridge to nearly the original specifications, which means that we will have to reach something like 1970 feet per second muzzle velocity.
Due to Google's content policies, this is not the full version of the film. If you would like to see how I reload my 3030 cartridges, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/capandball. Thank you.
And that's it. We have nice, beautiful 3030 cartridges ready for action.
150 meters.
The outer edge for using the 3030 for hunting is probably around 200 yards. Now I'll be shooting the reloaded cartridges to 150 meters to see where the trajectory arrives at this distance. If the old instructions are right, the bullet should hit somewhere near the point of aim, an inch below the black aiming mark. Of course, 3 shots are never enough for properly determining the grouping of a rifle or a charge, but it is a good indication whether a concept works or not. The first shot was a bit high, but I know it was my fault. The other 2 are in a just excellent group.
Just a few years after this cartridge was launched on the market, a new heavier bullet was also added to the assortment, which was a 170 grain bullet. Now, all these bullets, they were metal patched, which means that they were jacketed bullets. This was the common term for the metal jacket bullets. They had soft point heads, or they were full metal jacket bullets as well. But there was one very, very interesting cartridge that was introduced also just a few months after the launch of the rifle, was the so-called short-range cartridge. Now, the short-range cartridge was intended to multiply the capabilities of the rifle. There were some hunting situations when you don't need the full power of a 30 caliber cartridge. So the short-range cartridge was actually a plinking cartridge designed for small game, like shooting a turkey, for example, or a rabbit. And you save the meat because you don't deliver that much energy to the game. Now, these cartridges, they were charged with only 6 grains of the same powder that was used for the full charge cartridges, and only a 100 grain bullet. Later, the weight of this bullet was increased to 117 grain, but technically the performance remained the same. Now we are going to see how these cartridges perform today. It's quite interesting.
My reload for the short-range cartridge is not an exact copy. The bullet is a 110 grain copper-plated bullet that was originally intended for the N1 carbines. My goal here was to create a low-velocity, low-recoil cartridge with only minimal 5.5 grains of powder charge from hot shotgun powder. Let's try the Uberti rifle at 50 meters with this cartridge.
Let's check it.
And although the pressure is very low, you cannot see significant blowback. Just a minor blowback here at the neck you can see, but that's nothing. So all in all, it works fine.
In Hungary, we have an offhand 50-meter discipline for pre-1896 lever-action rifles. And I really have to say that with this group, this cartridge, this rifle fully qualifies for winning scores here. The original velocity of this cartridge was around 1,100 feet per sec. Let's see how this performs.
357. 357. No recoil at all. It's like shooting a 22.
So the velocity is around 1,060 feet per sec, which is quite close to the original.
These cartridges, they multiply the capabilities of the rifle because you loaded one in the chamber and in the magazine several of the full charge cartridges. Now, if you saw a small game, you could shoot the small game with this one. But if there's a dangerous game or a big game, then you just eject the cartridge and there you go, you have a full power cartridge in your chamber and you're ready to fire. So that's quite a good solution. So the original Winchester version of the short-range cartridge was launched in 1896, and only a few months after, Marlin copied it. So they launched their version of the short-range cartridge as well, because it was such a good idea. In Europe, or at least in my country, usually the hunters say that the 30-30 is a weak cartridge for European big game, which I think is not true. Probably it is based on the original muzzle velocity of the cartridge, but since that time, a few hundred meters per second were added to the muzzle velocity of a 160 or 70 grain bullet. So I decided to measure the velocity of some commercially available cartridges and also my reload as well, just to show these people that the muzzle energy of this cartridge is not a joke, and it is still perfect for any kind of European big game.
The new 30 Winchester centerfire cartridge was cheaper and lighter than the 3855, so it was out of question which one will win the competition. According to Winchester, the key benefits of the new cartridge were the cleanness, the smokelessness, high velocity, and the flat trajectory. According to the catalog, the full metal patch gives a great penetration. The soft-nosed bullet will expand to give effects upon the animal tissue very much greater than the small caliber would otherwise enable. The 30-30 had an excellent trajectory compared to the old black powder cartridges. When the rifle was 0 to 200 yards, the peak of the trajectory was only 5 inches above the line of sight. That was less than half than in case of the black powder charged 3855. The flat trajectory helped the hunters much, as the ideal sighting distance increased a lot. Shooters felt that they are much more accurate with the new rifles and cartridges. And with the good shot placement, it is out of question that the 30 caliber bullet was capable of killing any game or enemy.
Let's measure some velocities, ladies and gentlemen. The first one is a 125 grain Federal semi-jacketed hollow point bullet.
The Federal 30-30 cartridge with the 125 grain hollow point bullet has a high velocity and flat trajectory. It is a good choice for smaller game, but not necessarily for medium or big game.
.814. Next one is... Which one is the next one? Next one is a reload with a 150 grains Cellier Bellow bullet. It's a semi-jacketed and normal soft point bullet. And the charge is 2 grams of Victavori N140.
The powder charge is close to the original 30 grains in weight. The bullet is very traditional, flat base, soft point hunting bullet, nothing particular.
.654.
Very close to the original. 8 feet per sec less than the 1970. Next cartridge should be the most powerful. It is the Hornady Lever Evolution.
.753. So it is not the fastest one, but still a good velocity.
Let's summarize what we just saw. The Hornady Lever Evolution cartridge delivered 2,259 feet per sec, with 2,940 joules of muzzle energy. The Federal cartridge delivered 2,440 feet per sec, with 2,700 joules of energy. The reload, replicating the original, delivered 1,962 feet per sec, with 2,078 joules. And the short-range cartridge, with a 110 grain bullet, delivered 1,071 feet per sec and 454 joules of muzzle energy. That is much better than a 22, by the way. Much, much better. Let's see the external ballistics of the 150 grain soft point bullet reload that can be close to the original. The ideal sighting distance is around 150 meters, allowing a shot without sight adjustments up to 170 meters. At this range, your bullet will fly in a trajectory 2 inches above and below the line of sight, so you don't have to think about whether the game is at 25 meters or 150. The vertical deviation of a well-aimed bullet will still puncture a target the size of the heart of a big game. And at 170 meters you still have an energy of 1,200 joules, which is quite a lot.
So I think, ladies and gentlemen, that this cartridge is just perfect for any kind of European big game with muzzle energies well over 3,000 joules. In my country, you need at least 2,500 joules for any kind of big game, which means that we are well within that range. And they can still do the job, so you don't have to be afraid of that cartridge. It will serve you well. Even if you think about the limitations that your rifles have, you're shooting an open sight, which means that you are not going to fire above 200 meters, even with a peep sight like this. With a normal iron sight, you don't go further than, let's say, 100 meters. But I'm probably with the peep sights, you can also stay under 150 meters. And under that 150 meters or 200 meters, there is no question that this can do the job. So this is surely not your cartridge and not your rifle if you only hunt your game above 400 meters. But if you really want to dive deep into hunting and shoot the game under a distance where it can smell you, it can see you, it can hear you, well, that makes a difference, because under that distances, well, this is just perfect, and this is a very good companion. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in. You've been watching the Capandball YouTube channel. If you like what I do, then please subscribe, like, share and comment to help the channel to grow. If you wish to support us, you can do it through Patreon, where you will find exclusive content from me time by time. We are also present on the History of Weapons and War platform, which is an excellent hiding place for gun nuts like us, with thousands of videos from educational channels. So ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay cool and keep your powder dry.